or as a backup solution to a main T1 because it's, it's cheaper. Not so much. Usually the DSL problem is the one with the bigger headaches. As much as they try to push business class DSL, it's not really a business class solution because you can't generally get SLAs, service level agreements. Things that say, hey, when my circuit goes down, I can call them up and yell at them and have them come out in 4 hours and do this and fix it. DSL is best effort, meaning we can get around to fixing it maybe when we're out there next Thursday if there happens to be a full moon. They might fix it. If there's noise on the line, they might fix it. If it randomly drops out, they might fix it. So in this day and age, if you're going to have problems, it will be on a DSL line. And as critical as things are in this day and age with the internet and email being so critical for businesses, you really don't indulge it, don't buy it. It's not worth it. I fix a lot of problems with it. Let's see. Another thing to contemplate when you're doing all of this is generally money. A lot of times when I go back to management or a manager on an issue and say, yeah, I need $40,000, $50,000 worth of gear to do this. I want all new routers somewhere. If you're lucky, I'll get it. If not, what will tend to end up happening is I'll get, well, what's wrong with what we have? We've only bought it 6 years ago. Unfortunately, depending on where you are, this is an all too familiar reality. eBay is your friend. A lot of cheap Cisco gear right now. A lot of, you gotta be careful not to buy something too incredibly aged. That $5 deal may turn out to be a nightmare because you can't get a firmware for it or a manual, or even a password recovery procedure. And I see Paul waving back there, so he's all too familiar with it. That is a very good point. And yeah, actually, that $40,000 or $50,000, a lot of vendors will actually do that because, and the really funny part is, and I really wish I had a way of tracing this. If you sell gear back to your vendor, or you trade it in with them, Cisco or whoever, a lot of times that gear will come right back to eBay. It's just this loop. The vendor will give you credits. It doesn't ever actually go back to Cisco, and it just hits eBay. I'm sure there's pieces of gear that haven't been powered on in 5 years, but have been shipped all over the country. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I have done this, and it does work.
Yeah, and I have been. I've seen similar things happen, and that's always one thing to look at. Is another thing that's happened actually that this brings up. The carriers themselves have gotten into selling hardware. Because the market for services has gotten so very tight. They'll say, oh yeah, you could be a one-stop shop. Don't worry about going to CDW. Don't worry about going to, favorite local Cisco partner. We'll sell you the router you need, and we'll turn it, install it, and everything else. These are really good things to get because these are also sometimes loss leaders. I've gotten router cards for free, again, with the whole, you didn't deliver my DS3 on time, how dare you? Give me free routers. Sometimes they'll do this. It never hurts to ask. And also use it, you can also drive the price of a router below cost as well because you'll say, well, I'm going to go over to here and have this bid out and you guys are trying to sell it to me. And they'll be so desperate to have the thing delivered and to sell it just so they can make sales quotas because nobody actually uses them as hardware vendors a lot of the time, that you'll get stuff almost at cost or slightly below, especially if there's a very expensive service attached to it at the same time. It works a little bit differently for them because they're dumping inventory rather than giving you service credits. It usually works out in their favor as well, so it's one of the reasons that it happens. Another really useless thing that I found from them, they're going to try to sell you managed services, managing the router, and if you don't have time to do it, this is sometimes well and good to have. However, one thing that I found that is utterly useless is their proactive management or proactive monitoring. And I've had this happen with several carriers. They're supposed to have it where if the circuit drops, they're supposed to call you. Their criteria for this is nebulous, and I've never gotten a straight answer out of any of them, other than possible red alarm or whatever. It doesn't necessarily diagnose a router drop. Even when the circuit does drop and die, usually most of the time, I had an independent third-party company actually doing this for me for several sites because they were actually contracted to do a lot of the maintenance. They were catching stuff that just using ping, that the carrier never even saw. And then when you go back to say, well, we had an availability of 15 minutes and this is unacceptable, and they say, well, we didn't see anything wrong. You're paying for a monitoring service, and our monitoring service didn't find anything. So not only are they charging you money, they're also using it to tell you that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the service that they're providing. It's generally not worth it. I think out of doing this for 10 years with doing managed WANs, I've had it exactly twice that they've called me where the circuit was actually down and that they were actually proactively doing a dispatch to go fix the problem. And that's with 90 circuits across the country or so. Have had them call me lots of times to say that it's down and it wasn't. And as it turns out, they had the monitoring for another customer in the same building messed up with mine. And that customer actually had turned off the service. They were so disgusted with it, as it turns out. So it's not a good use of money. Anytime they're telling you they're trying to sell you something to make your life easier, just like anything else in life, they're probably pulling your leg. The other one right now is, I was trying to think of the name of it. It's, no, unfortunately, it slips my brain. It's been a long week for me. Unfortunately, I don't do slides, but what I did put together is a bunch of notes on this. So, trying to make sure I didn't miss anything because I'm actually running a little early on this. Again, I always hate to throw it out there, but any other questions at the moment? Okay.
All right. You mentioned monitoring.
Yeah, that's on.
Oh, yeah. Is this thing on? Okay.
Hello?
You had mentioned monitoring, and monitoring various switches, I mean, is different than monitoring a host, obviously. Is there any kind of, I guess, recommendations? I mean, there's so many monitoring solutions out there, but I mean, is there one that, is the best bang for your buck, and then maybe one that, is going to cost you a bit, but is really going to...
At this point in things, you can pay for managed monitoring. My suggestion, if you know Linux or Unix or something, they're on Fresh Meat and in Debian's repository and any Linux distributions repositories. You've got MRTG for bandwidth and graphing and monitoring. You've got SmokePing. You've got Nagios. There's dozens and dozens of tools. In terms of bang for the buck, find the combination of open source tools that work for you and use them. There are a lot of commercial tools that will actually, there's actually a lot of commercial tools and a lot of commercial appliances that all they are is embedded Linux boxes with some of these tools with really fancy screens that they've paid some graphics designer to do really nice HTML for. That's really the same tools. So go ahead and just find something that works for you. And every network is slightly different. I had one that all I needed really was MRTG and SmokePing, and just to find out, and some really some Perl scripts and some shell scripts that all they did once a minute was go out and ping the remote site. If it failed to ping twice, that there was probably something wrong, and go ahead and send an email out. You see these packages that for very large sites, it does make sense, especially they've got automatic detection and discovery to make your life a lot saner. And for very, very large sets of nodes, that might be worth the money you're going to pay for them. A lot of them just aren't. There's a lot of crap out there. Disgustingly large amounts of crap, unfortunately. If you go through network computing, most of the stuff I've looked at in that I've gotten free demos of and trials of has not proved to be worth the money. Just go through freshmeat.net, really. And that is true. I've been kind of focusing so far on and this is where a lot of the headaches are on the telco side, on the provider side. When you're doing, and again, when you're talking about knowing your network, knowing knowing your network, knowing how things are put together. Nmap-SP for ping scan, just pinging, seeing what's out there. I found so many hosts that other people in the rest of the IT department I was working in at the time had put there, and it's like, hey, if I take this link down for 5 minutes, this box is going to freak out. I didn't know that was there. But yeah, you should, when you're doing documentation, things like Nmap and Nessus is mostly for security vulnerability scanning, but hey, it's also good for host identification too. Nmap's fingerprinting works okay, but things like Nessus and Snort for looking at kinds of traffic that you're looking at, NTOP, to know your environment. Just start digging out there. Google, like I said, initially, Google is your friend. Chances are you are not the first person to have this problem. And in this community, chances are there's somebody else who's written a tool because they were too ticked off to deal with it anymore, and they decided to do something about it. A lot of the common tools I use, honestly, again, not getting fancy. SSH, Telnet, unfortunately. A lot of Telnet-only routing and switching and management devices out there. Another good thing to know is pinouts. Know your RJ45 pinouts for T1. Know your Cisco console pinouts, because occasionally you'll break an end off a cable and need to make a new one so it'll stay attached. Things like that. One of the things I carry on me, I had in my hand earlier, that's incredibly useful. Adtran has these, but you can buy these in various places. Anybody who's not familiar with it, this is a T1 loopback jack. And this is invaluable for especially connectivity issues between the smart jack and your router. You plug it into the cable facing your router or device, CSU, DSU, and it'll usually bring it up, and you can get a physical known good loop. I use one of these often enough that I carry one with me on my keychain on a regular basis. Also, get to know your way around a phone room. Know what a 66 block is. Know what a 110 block is. Know what a smart jack shelf looks like if you don't know what a smart jack shelf looks like. That sort of thing. Another thing is that, and again, along the lines of management tools, know how the low-level operating environment of your devices work. If it's ProCurve, know how the ProCurve switch environment works. A lot of times what I'll see is levels of obfuscation pretty much where you'll have a management tool like Tivoli or something really nice, or ProCurve Switch Manager or Cisco Works or something like that, sitting in front of a router. And I've actually gotten a call from, at the current client I'm at, doing a lot of work for, I got a call from a Cisco admin on another site. The Cisco Works system was down. They were in the middle of changing out. Two circuits. He was freaking out because he couldn't remember how to log in and do this. Every so often, give yourself a refresher on how to go back through and just even configure an interface, get into a router, know iOS, that sort of thing. More questions, comments, observations? Anybody got any?
You mentioned a couple of times about I was just curious about at what point